In the Creature from Jekyll Island, Griffin's outlining basically the inception of the Federal Reserve. So early 20th century, the U.S. experienced a financial panic, most notably the Panic of 1907, which highlighted the need for stabilization of the economy. So we had bank failures, which who knows what caused that, but these men opportunistically inserted the idea of, hey, we need to centralize this whole thing so we can prevent this from happening again. 1908 through 1910, Nelson Aldrich, who was heavily influenced by banking interests, began advocating for central banking reform. November 1910, a group of bankers, politicians, including Aldrich, Warburg, Vanderlip, others, met here secretly on Jekyll Island in Georgia, and their aim was to craft a reform plan away from public scrutiny. So they're trying to do this without the public seeing what they were doing, which begs the question, why? After Woodrow Wilson's election, new legislation was introduced. The Federal Reserve Act was drafted by Carter Glass and Robert Owen, who worked with Paul Warburg to ensure the bankers' interests were represented. And then finally, December 23rd, 1913, literally the day before, I think Congress was already out.
They were already
out for Christmas holiday. Again, by design, they want to do this when no one's looking, including Congress. The Federal Reserve Act was passed by Congress and signed into law by President Wilson, which established the Federal Reserve System, which Griffin describes as a compromise between political forces and banking interests designed to give it the appearance of public control while retaining private banker influence. Okay, so that's just the timeline, basically what happened. That was the inception of the Fed. I want to throw it over to you because a lot of people would call this, actually people did call this book conspiracy theory garbage for a long time. When I read this 20 years ago, people were like, oh, that's bullshit. That's not true. You know, blah, blah, blah. Today, it's taken a lot more seriously. And I guess you could tie in there was also the sinking of the Titanic in 1912. I don't know if maybe we'll jump into that next.
But I think like the thing to note here, right? So how did central banking even begin? And then why was the Federal Reserve creation even more unique? So humanity's had a few iterations. The first one was rule by divine right, monarchies, right? The second was literal slavery. And then the third was the debt slavery, which is what we've been under since the late 17th century. We've been under a debt slave system. No one is actually free across the entire planet. And what's interesting here is that these men were competitors. Warburg, his family, Max, his brother, ran the Bavarian banks in Germany. They were Rothschild underlings. Aldrich was both connected to Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, and his grandson became vice president and was Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller. These men were all connected to both the European banking houses and the New York money center banks. And for the first time, really in history, it was a collaboration to form what is a cartel. A cartel is just a monopoly that was a willing joint venture. And so that's what makes this distinguished from Nathaniel Rothschild taking over the Bank of England, and then their bloodline Bank of France as well. So this was kind of a unique situation, and because all of their interests flew upwards towards the Federal Reserve, that's why their Federal Reserve is now kind of the head of the snake right outside of the Bank of International Settlements. And so the Fed, instead of the Bank of England, which was actually part of the Bretton Woods and a result of World War II, took the pound off the reserve currency and brought it to the States.
Yeah, so we had Bank of Amsterdam, as you said, late 17th century. This was like the first real central bank. This was the one the Bank of England was modeled after, which was the second major central bank, dominant one in the world. And this was the one the founding fathers were escaping from in the founding of this country. The United States was created to not have a central bank, actually, and this was the third attempt, right? We had 3 attempts at a central bank. First, actually, if you'll tell the history, one of them failed, one of them was in temporarily, and then the Fed was the third.
The first was in 1791, and Hamilton, if you don't know Hamilton's story, he's the son of a prostitute and a Rothschild bloodline member. So he was and he was born in St. Thomas. He unknowingly, this is why he let Aaron Burr kill him to a large degree. He unknowingly brought in the first Bank of the United States, which was a non-value based money, debt based money. And from 1791 to the expiry of its charter was 20 years, we went into free fall in the United States. And you have to go find the forefathers' words themselves describing the economic activity. But essentially, it was confiscatory just like it is today, but it was way more out in the open. Because here you think you have money in a bank because a screen tells you. That is just pathetically incompetent and malpractice. Like it is so far removed from the brick of gold or the plot of land that the fact that people believe this is just mind numbing. It drives me insane, actually. And the entirety of the Senate and Congress all said, F off, we're done. What do you think happens? War of 1812, right after that expired. Oh, you guys aren't renewing charter? We're going to war. And but for Russia coming to our assistance, because the nations were equally Christian, we would have lost and we would have gone back to British Empire. Then they somehow create enough panic in 1819 to bring the second Bank of the United States in. And this is where Andrew Jackson comes in. Because by the time he's elected to a second term, where I actually have the quotes from him. Hold on. This is so powerful. Forgive me for not having it memorized.
Just while you're looking that up, I mean, Chris is touching on something that is a recurrent pattern throughout history, and that is every time a central bank emerges, it has to do typically with war. Typically, the excuse is to finance war. So if a government's going to wage war, they typically have to pay for that from their own balance sheet.
Right.
We typically use the term a war chest for something like this.
Exactly.
But if that government establishes itself a monopoly on the currency, it can just print money, externalize the cost of that inflation on everyone else, and then therefore expand its war chest to the savings of the entire population. So it enables a country to go to war much longer, with much more severity.
It gets real dark. I'll go one iteration higher. This is Andrew Jackson to the central bankers, to their faces. When you won, you divided the profits amongst you. When you lost, you charged it to the bank. You tell me that if I take the deposits from the bank and annul its charter, I'll ruin 10,000 families. That may be true, gentlemen, but it is your sin. Should I let you go on, you will ruin 50,000 more, and that would be my sin. You are a den of vipers and thieves. I have determined to rout you out, and by the eternal, I will rout you out. 1832.
Andrew Jackson, President of the United States, native of Tennessee. I'll throw that one in there. Total badass. And he did rout them out, actually.
He did.
At least temporarily. He got rid of the second make of the United States, and he also cleared the
only period
budget,
of American history. And actually, you have to go back pre-Rome to find a nation that wasn't indebted.
Right. And the words he used, the den of vipers, these men were very strong warriors of Christ, basically. He's quoting Christ in that phrase. If you enjoyed this clip, click here for the full episode and here for more just like it. Also, like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money and subscribe to stay connected. Thank you.